So the problems in this video go along with the last video on isolating y in equations, yet kids for whatever reason find these ones sometimes a little trickier. They use the exact same form, the exact same process, they do the exact same thing, but I think the fact that it's not just the familiar x and y maybe gives some kids a little bit of trouble. We're going to go through a few of these though and talk about how you can take any formula, not just one with x's and y's, and isolate a given variable. So my first problem here asks us to get r by itself in this formula, r being right here. So I'm going to go ahead and draw my line here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I see that I have a couple things being multiplied against r. I have pi times r squared, and I have times h over here. So to cancel out the multiplication, I have to divide. And I could do it one at a time, but it's easier if you just divide by pi and h at the same time. And you have to do that on both sides. So the pi and the h are going to cancel over here. All you're going to have left is r squared on the right. And over here, we have v over pi h. So once we hit this point, we're almost done. We almost have r by itself, but this squared is messing things up for us. If you think back to your geometry class, when you did like Pythagorean theorem, when you had a variable squared, the way you cancel that out is by taking the square roots of both sides. Just like adding and subtracting our inverses and cancel each other, multiplying and dividing cancel each other, squaring something and taking a square root cancel each other out. So all I have left over here is r, and on this side I have this ugly looking square roots. Really not much I can do with it, I just kind of leave it as is. There's a formula with r all by itself. My second problem here, and by the way, this first formula as well should have looked familiar to you. For those of you who can think of where it's from, it is a geometry formula. It's for the volume of a cylinder. This is a formula you should be super familiar with as well, and it's the area formula for a triangle. And we want to take this formula and get the b all by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do here is take this 1/2, and the way you cancel out a multiplying a fraction is by multiplying by its reciprocal. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 2 over 1. Remember, instead of dividing both sides by 1/2, when you divide by 1/2, change, flip, you would change and you'd multiply by 2 over 1. If you multiply by 2 over 1 here, you're going to get 2 over 2, which is just 1 and cancels. So I get 2a equals bh. And then, to get b by itself, I just divide by h. So my answer, 2a over h, equals b. Two more examples for this video. Slightly bigger formulas, but also two formulas that you should have seen before, and hopefully, go ahead and try to identify them if you can. Ooh. My first one actually is the wrong variable here. I'm going to change that. That is actually a formula for surface area, not for volume. This first formula here is surface area for a cylinder. Alright, so on this problem here, we want to get h all by itself. So, in that, it looks really complicated. There's a lot going on here. There's actually a big piece, this whole first term right here, 2 pi r squared, that's just sitting there. This whole guy is just sitting there. We don't want it. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 2 pi r squared from both sides. So when I do that, draw my line here as well, I'm just going to get, it's probably not enough space, s minus 2 pi r squared equals 2 pi rh. Problem got a little offline there. These canceled out. The 2 pi rh is all that's left, and s minus 2 pi r squared over there. Well, if I want to get h by itself, 2 pi and r are all being multiplied against the h right there. So I could divide one at a time, or I can just divide everything right now by 2 pi rh. Oops, just 2 pi r. I'm making a mess of this video. Alright, so if I divide both sides by 2 pi r, these are going to cancel. All that's left over here is h, because these parts went away. And this crazy looking thing over here is my formula with h by itself. So this is my answer. Alright, one more problem in this video. On this one, we're asked to solve for b sub 2, and this formula is the area formula for a trapezoid. Hopefully it looked familiar. The first thing I'm going to do here, a lot of people would be tempted to distribute into the problem. And it's not wrong if you distribute, like it would still work out. But this part right here is really being multiplied against the parenthesis, this 1/2 h. So what I'm going to do is first take care of the 1/2 by multiplying by 2/1 on both sides. So I just get 2a equals h, and then b1 plus b2 in parentheses. Now again, if I wanted to, I could distribute in my h, and I could go from there, and it's going to work out just fine. But since the h is just sitting here, I'm going to go ahead and divide both sides by h right off the bat. If I do that, I get 2a over h equals just b1 plus b2. I'm not going to write the parentheses anymore because there's nothing on the outside of them, just leave it like that. And then I just have to subtract b1 from both sides. So I end up with 2a over h minus b1 equals b2. If you distributed, you probably got a slightly different looking answer, but it amounts to the same thing. Let's see, if you were to actually distribute there, just so you guys can see, you would end up with 2a b minus h b1 over h, I believe. Which is, like, this is if you would have distributed and solved. It's the same thing. These two parts are equivalent right here. I'm not going to go through the math of doing that, but if you got this, that's an acceptable answer as well.